afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Pollard. Thank you for coming.
Good
We
afternoon.
will try to use the time very efficiently and not detain you beyond the measure that already we have done so over Julie. The members of the committee before whom you come today are Minister Cummins on my right, Ministers Jordan and Minister Sandra Husband on my left, and we have online Dr. Sonia Brown and Minister Cattle, all members of the Public Accounts Committee. We also have representation from the Office of the Auditor General. We have to start by letting you make an affirmation as to the testimony, the evidence you should give, or swearing an oath.
Mr. Pollard, could you please stand? Raise the Bible in the right hand and repeat the oath of witness, please. Before you.
The evidence that I shall give before the committee shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you so much. You may have your seat.
All right, thank you, Mr. Pollard. Mr. Pollard, yeah. Members, Mr. Pollard is available to us. Anybody wants to go first? All right, question to you, Mr. Pollard. You have access right now to the report of the Auditor General. You have that with you? On page 56 at 430 and 4.30 and 4.31. Now, I look at 4.31, and it says that the audit findings of which are captured in the report that you have. The audit was requested by the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs in the ministry, based on concerns about the seeming lack of criteria for approving the assistance and the type of assistance being provided. How would you respond to that? Permanent Secretary of the Ministry is requesting, is suggesting, recommending that this audit, or had recommended that this audit be carried out because he had, or she had, some serious concerns as to the seeming lack of criteria for approving assistance and the type of assistance which was being provided.
All right, thanks, Chair.
Before you answer that, and I forgot, thank you, Deputy Clerk, just read into the record, say for us your name officially and the position that you hold, your length of service there, before you respond.
All right. Andrew Pollard, Coordinator, Poverty Alleviation and Reduction Program.
And you've been there?
Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs.
And you've been there forever?
No. And I think that's a good place to start here. I agree with the statement here.
But you were been there for how long?
Oh, sorry. From September the 23rd, 2019.
All right, yeah, go ahead.
Right. So starting from that point, I agree the permanent secretary was new, and I agree with her perspective. But as I reflected just now, I was not a part of the organization for the period under review. And as I said, I share the permanent secretary's view.
why do you say you share the view? What makes you share the view that there ought to be concerns and that there ought to be that there ought to be this type of audit?
Yeah, well, I was working in the ministry and in the particular department, so I think I should clarify here a bit that the department in which I was working was called, as they said, PAR, the Poverty Alleviation and Reduction Program. Now, that particular department had two arms to it: the Poverty Eradication Fund, which is what the report has addressed, and the IC Bridge Program. I was project coordinator for, well, I started out as project consultant for the IC Bridge Program, and then I became project officer for the IC Bridge Program. The IC Bridge Program is a poverty reduction was a poverty reduction program, but it was not associated with the Poverty Eradication Fund, so to
But
speak.
coming out of your experiences thus far since 2019,
Mhm.
yeah, and what perhaps you may have noticed through reference to files of operations that preceded you, what would be your concerns based on your experience to date from 2019? And what you would know in terms of any reference to information in any files prior to your time that you would have seen? Why would there be a concern that there ought to be an audit or audits?
Well, it wasn't necessarily a reference to files. The mayor was working in the same space. And you would have heard from time to time how persons were getting assistance and that sort of thing. So that's why I share the view.
So there's no particular concern of yours
Not necessarily.
as to the systems and the way things are managed, accounted for, that would suggest we need to have this type of audit from time to time?
Well, sir, I wasn't privy to how the particular department was being run. When I say I wasn't privy, though, it was a mere cursory understanding in terms of how the department was being run. So you would have heard things working in the same space as he said. You would have heard things from time to time, heard people talking, that sort of thing.
Can you speak page 60 of the report? Page 60 of the report, 4.38. A paragraph, a section that speaks to doubtful disbursements from the fund, notwithstanding the limitation in determining the appropriateness for disbursements from the fund. There were disbursements which seemed not to readily fit the description of alleviation of poverty. These included disbursements for mortgage arrears, a marriage seminar, a sponsorship of shows. Criteria used to approve these disbursements was not provided. A previous coordinator of the fund was of the opinion that assistance for mortgages was not part of the mandate of the fund. Can you speak to that in any wise?
Sir, I am not able to speak to that. Like I said, I didn't have that intimate knowledge of the fund, of the Poverty Eradication Fund, so I unfortunately cannot.
And you have no
speak
access
that.
you had no access to any of their files.
No, I didn't.
Insofar as you're aware right now, where the Eradication Fund operates, now you were there, since 2019, insofar as you're aware, you don't see instances of projects which might be considered inappropriate in relation to the mandate of the fund?
No, sir, because the fund has been put in abeyance by PS. She came and found and had challenges with how persons were accessing the fund.
The fund has been put in abeyance? What do you
Yes.
mean by that?
Well, that part of the poverty alleviation reduction program has not been operational since 2019.
And that's because, you said that's because,
Oh, right, so that's because the permanent secretary halted the operations.
who is the permanent secretary?
Ms. Gabrielle Springer,
Gabrielle Springer?
yes.
So as far as you are aware, Ms. Permanent Secretary Springer put a halt to the operations of the fund
Yes, sir.
because
Oh, because as we saw here at the first reference we made, the request for the audit on page 57, based on her concerns about the seeming lack of criteria for approving the assistance and the type of assistance being provided.
do you know how long is it Miss Gabrielle Springer?
Yes.
You know how long PS Gabrielle Springer would have been at the ministry?
She came in 2018. Yeah.
You know who was the permanent secretary before that? Would you know?
Yeah, before that it was, I think, Miss Ernesta Drex.
Miss Ernesta?
I'm sure. Yeah, I think it was Ernesta Drex before
Drex?
that. Yes.
You sure?
I am not sure.
So what do? No funds being dispensed by you guys. What do you guys do?
All right, so as coordinator now, I am responsible for regional and international collaboration with the international organizations, but I'm also responsible for social protection within the ministry. So anything to do with social protection, that's my area of function.
What do you mean by social protection?
So social protection is what we would call in the past, we think we still talk about it now, social services, the delivery of social services. So, but that is more or less looking at contributory, what we call non-contributory social services. Social protection involves a whole lot more, but it is still looking at providing assistance to persons who are poor and vulnerable persons. Really and truly, social protection is for everyone, though. So I talked about non-contributory, but there's also contributory, which is looking at NIS and such like.
Two things. You said you're responsible for regional and international.
Cooperation and
Cooperation.
collaboration.
What do you mean by that?
With development partners. So at this point in time, we we're coming to the end of what we call the UN SDG Fund Joint Program. And that's a program with the five UN agencies working collaboratively, looking at a review of the social protection system in Barbados.
So
And
does money come to the fund from these sources?
No. This is a $4.8 million program, but that is mostly in terms of technical assistance.
Okay. How do you relate to the Poverty Alleviation Fund that operates out of the Prime Minister's office? If that's the right designation.
You're talking about under Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Right. Well, basically, as we do with most other social service agencies, they make referrals to us. But basically, that's more or less what
So when they
happens.
make referrals to you, what happens?
Well, we have to pass it on.
Pass on the referral to whom?
To the welfare department or the National Assistance Board or the National Disabilities Unit.
So why is it coming to you then if you have to pass it on to all these other agencies?
Sometimes I'm not sure, sir.
Yes, Minister Kelly.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I just have a question. It's at page 65. You said that the fund is in abeyance, yes?
Mhm.
So on that basis, given the fund is in abeyance on the basis of the recommendations that it needed to be put in abeyance by the permanent secretary, the recommendations from the Auditor General are captured on pages 65 through 66. And the first recommendation is that the ministry determines the future role of the fund and governance, taking into account the assistance provided by other government agencies. On the basis of the chairman's last questions and your answers, has the ministry done this assessment to determine the future role of the fund and how it should be governed, and with what agencies in collaboration with the ministry?
All right, thanks for that, Ma'am. Yes, we did look at the fund. We have a report which has been submitted to our minister, and we have more or less like two options. One is to discontinue the fund or to see how best it can be incorporated. I should tell you, I don't think it's a secret, I should tell you that our ministry is currently going through the process of a new organization, the rationalization of the social services, particularly National Disabilities Unit, the National Assistance Board, the Welfare Department, and the Child Care Board. So this is how we are trying to look at those recommendations and put them in place. Yeah?
Chair, I do have a follow-up question because as I looked at the document provided to the House by the previous person who sat in the chair, and I listened to the current representative, you, sir, thank you very much for being here. I do have a question. During the period under review in this audit, 2007 up to 2018, we have a number of persons who would have been referred to any of the agencies that are meant to be coordinating delivery of services. And these are the most vulnerable persons in our society. And I am troubled by the number of persons for whom houses were meant to be provided, repairs were meant to be done, and between 2009 and up to 2018, while monies were allocated and in some instances spent, or certainly disbursed, we are not seeing any delivery of services. Would you be in a position to say to us, what is the follow-up now of the agency under the umbrella of your social protection function in the ministry with those persons who would have been held in abeyance for the period 2007, through 2018?
I'm not in a position, ma'am, to say what is the situation going forward, but I was listening to when Mr. Armstrong was here, and I did hear him say that they will do an investigation with why persons did not get the houses, and they will be able to let us know. So.
But Chairman, if I can just follow on, I'm not really asking about what's happening going forward. I am concerned that the documentation provided by Mr. Campbell and also documented in the Auditor General's report suggests that there are a number of vulnerable persons for whom requests were submitted for support, monies were disbursed, and no action has been taken. I'd like to get a sense of whether your department is in possession of any information since you came to office in 2019 on the status of the welfare of all of those persons who are outstanding?
No, the simple answer is no, ma'am. We are not in possession of any information in that regard.
Anybody else? Yes, Minister Jordan.
This is a very general question, and in some respects, it follows on from Minister Cummins' question. It is a concern that is voiced by people from time to time, those concerned with what appears to be situations around us in our communities that need addressing. And the general question to you, because the essence of the audit is suggesting that persons who have fallen through the cracks, let me put it that way, are not being tended to. So using a very Rose Hill term maybe. My question to you is, are you satisfied, even in your short tenure, I'm moving away from the fund itself, because I think you indicated that you're the coordinator for poverty alleviation and reduction of poverty, right?
Reduction program.
Program. Poverty alleviation and reduction program.
Correct.
Now, are you satisfied with how the system that is set up? So you spoke about non-contributory, and from that I understood you to be probably suggesting situations that are not addressed by other areas, for example, like national insurance, people contribute, get something. These are situations outside of that. Are you satisfied that those persons who fall in that category, their needs are being addressed in a humane, timely fashion? In your 2 years in the function, what you've seen, does it suggest to you that the distress of people is being addressed? If yes, fine. If not, what do you see being put in place? What are the plans being put in place to make sure that people are not falling through the cracks?
All right, thanks for that. As I guess with many things, there's always room for improvement, and so it is with the persons who are vulnerable and how they are treated with. Now, I want to skip forward a little bit in terms of your question, in terms of how do we see that being dealt with. And so remember earlier I talked about the Department for Children and Family Services. That's what the amalgamated department is going to be called, right? And so that is an effort to be able to address those persons to better able to address those persons who are falling through the cracks. Prior to that, though, remember I said that I was project officer for the IC Bridge program. So the IC Bridge program is a program which addresses the needs of vulnerable persons and poor persons, but the family is the unit of intervention as opposed to the individual. So we're trying to capture the whole family there. And so we have now the Strengthening Human and Social Development program, which now is a derivative of the IC Bridge program, and that is also having the same modality of intervention. So the Strengthening Human and Social Development program has 250 households that they deal with. So IC Bridge had 30. Now, Strengthening Human and Social Development has 250, and so that again, and that 250 comprises about 1,500 persons of all ages. That again is indicative of how we are seeking to address the poverty and vulnerability in Barbados. And as I said, I dare say once the amalgamated department comes on stream, we will have a greater opportunity to address vulnerability and poverty. What we are doing right now, though, is we are trying to make things easier for persons to access the services that are there. So, for example, the welfare department, which takes the brunt of working with vulnerable persons, persons that complain they couldn't reach the welfare department, and so on. So what we did is we devised an online form, Microsoft Forms, where persons can now apply online. Yes, there are some kinks there, and so we're still seeking to work that out. But the opportunities are now greater for persons to present to the agency. Yeah? Hope that answers your question. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Miss. I have a question on 451 on page 64. Go ahead, Minister.
Chairman, I actually was going there myself. That's what I have marked
so
to ask.
You raised it earlier.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I have it to ask. Earlier I asked of the Auditor General about the functioning of the fund, and I want to draw your attention to page 64, paragraph 4.51. It says, a review of accounting records showed that a consultant, let me start from the beginning. A review of accounting records showed that a consultant was paid a total of $298,104.84 for work performed at different times during the period the 22nd of January 2013 through the 31st of May 2018. Some of these periods were continuous to the extent that the payments exceeded the $50,000 threshold for which a contract is required. No written contracts were provided for these periods. This is January 2013 through May 2018. Would you be in a position to shed any light on what you found when you joined the ministry on this particular matter?
Well, what I found, ma'am, thanks for that. What I found is that let me just say this, that as I said, I was working in the department at this time, right? I really can't speak to that, that's the honest truth. I can't speak to the whole issue of the contracts and so on.
So, in the Auditor General's report, Chairman, if I can continue, at page 66, the last recommendation made by the Auditor General speaks to monies disbursed to the agencies for houses that were constructed, which should be recovered. It says the ministry investigates the reasons why the houses were not constructed and determine the way forward in assisting the intended beneficiaries. And it talks about the effective measures for governance on page 65. And these are things that go back to the original questions that I was asking and Minister Jordan. Has there been any effort that you have seen to be able to address these recommendations made in the Auditor General's report to treat to the serious allegations at page 64, paragraph 4.51, and then recommendations to treat to them on pages 65 and 66 at paragraph 4.55?
No, ma'am, I can't say that there is, that we are actively pursuing these recommendations as you outlined at this point in time.
Is it possible then that in the report that you made earlier, that you made reference to earlier, which has been submitted to your minister for approval on the way forward, that these things are addressed therein?
Yes, ma'am, it's possible. That's right.
Is it a practice, Mr. Pollard, that when funds are disbursed from poverty alleviation to rural or to urban for projects, which would have been sent to y'all requesting funding, when those funds are disbursed, Is there any kind of follow through from poverty alleviation to see what becomes of those projects, how they're going, whether or not they've been finished? What are the final sums of money used? Any kind of follow-up like that as far as you're aware?
I am not aware, sir, because, as I said, I was not privy to the operations
Are
of
you
the
more,
poverty.
you're more IC?
IC Bridge,
all right,
correct,
Okay.
correct.
Minister Husbands, Minister Jordan, Minister Cattle, Dr. Brown, Mr. All right, well, let us thank you then for your time. Wish you well and be safe.
Thank you very much.
We have one more
Thank
individual
you.
to come, our colleagues, and that's Miss,
Ms. Hanaway is, she is the field investigator, and
pardon me?
Ms. Hanaway, who's coming next? Ms. Hanaway,
Yes, yes.
right. I would want to remain with her, in terms of support.
Why would you want that?
Well, Ms. Hanaway is, a junior officer, really.
And how long has she been there?
She's been there for the length of the,
From,
for the length of the program.
give us approximate year?
I think 1990.
So she'd be more exposed to the operations than you.
Yes.
So in a sense, you're her junior. Members have a problem with him staying?
Thank you very much.
She can sit and get a chair.
I can move him. Sure. Okay.
You gotta sanitize.
Yeah.
Oh, he can move the microphone.
He's gonna move the mic. Yeah.
Are you going to hold her hands through the exercise? She Not at all. Not at all. It's just that there are not many chivalrous persons anymore. Good afternoon. Is Hannah there? And she's field. Yeah, she's field investigative officer for the poverty. Thank you, Ms. Hanaway, for coming before the Public Accounts Committee. Share with us your knowledge as it relates to issues which we may want to raise with you coming out of the Auditor General's Report of 2020. You have before you and who will interact with you, Minister Cummins on my right, Minister Colin Jordan on my left, Minister Husbands. Online, we have Minister Cattle and Dr. Sonny Brown, all members of the committee. We also have representation in Ms. Cassandra Hayward from the Office of the Auditor General. Mr. Pollard has asked to stay while you're here. You don't have any objection to that?
No.
All right. Before we start, we have to have you do two things. You have to take an oath or make an affirmation, and then we want you to read your name into the record. Just recite your name and position and length of service at the Poverty Alleviation, so we can have that in the record.
Good afternoon, Ms. Hanaway. Could you please stand? You're going to take the oath or you're going to do affirmation?
The oath.
Okay, could you raise the Bible in your right hand and read the oath of witness before you?
The evidence that I shall give before the committee shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you. You may sit.
Thank you. So just state your name and the position at the Poverty Alleviation Eradication Fund, and if you have served anywhere else within the social welfare services of the government as it relates to this particular report, just let us know that.
Okay, I'm Jacqueline Hanwell, Field Investigator of the Ministry of People Empowerment and Affairs. I have been with the ministry since 1998.
Okay. All right, my colleagues would have some questions for you. 94 you said?
98.
1998.
Yeah.
What do you investigate?
Pardon me?
What do you investigate?
What do I investigate? The person's social conditions, persons who request assistance. I investigate their conditions.
So if we were faced with a situation where a request was made of the Poverty Eradication Fund for $60,000 to fix the house of person X, and you were faced with a situation where the original request, the original assessment suggests that the project should cost $40,000, where would you come in terms of reconciling that? Where would your duties fall?
What would happen?
And the initial, just to be clear, initial request is made for $40,000 to fix the house of Miss Y. Later on, we find that it's $75,000, not to fix the house, to rebuild the house. Where would your duties fall in that type of situation?
Well, I would have already assessed the situation to find out it's 60, that's 40. But given that I don't have the technical expertise, the technical officer would then recognize that it would cost more than the 40, and they will in turn relay that information to the ministry, and we will seek to address the situation by asking for the additional funds.
Your investigation would not therefore relate to the actual costings.
No.
You're investigating the person's
Circumstances.
circumstances.
Yes, please.
All right, my colleagues may ask some questions for you. We won't keep you too long, I hope. Mr. Minister Jordan?
Yeah, I have a question in relation to the timelines. There have been situations where, based on the evidence that we have received so far, assessments were made, and then 5 years later, 10 years later,
15 years.
persons, 15 years later, some of these matters are not addressed. Your role as field investigator, once you have submitted to ministry, do you have any role in following up with persons who you've already assessed to find out where they are, if assistance has been given, what are the, if there are any continuing challenges?
Okay, we don't have a formal follow-up system, but yes, we would do some, maybe not on a large scale, but we would do some follow-up. And in terms of, you said 5 years down the line,
5, it could be as much as 15 based on the information that we've had.
the assistance is supposed to be one-off assistance. So, 5 down.
But let me be a little bit more clear. Some of the specifics in the Auditor General's report relate to houses. So this is, I'm referring, I should probably be more specific. I'm referring to situations where a person is assessed as really needing assistance in replacing some galvanized or some siding because the house is leaking, as the case may be. What we've seen is that sometimes 10 years later, based on the records, that issue has not been addressed. So my question to you is in that within that context, do you have a role, do you follow up once you've passed on to ministry? Is there a role that you carry out in following up in those situations?
Well, after it's passed on, you said to the ministry, after it's passed on to the ministry and approved, and then passed on to the different commission, they take it, they take it from there. My only role would follow up in between to find out how the family is doing, if the circumstances remain the same, or because there's not only housing, there are other situations in the household. So we also follow to see how the circumstances are, if they're any better or if they've gotten worse. But in terms of the housing, that is with the Urban and Rural Development Commission.
So in situations where well, let's ask a different question. Have you come across these situations that we have heard about where 5, 10 years later, what you've reported has not been addressed? Have you come across any of those in your investigating?
Yes, we have gone on visits with the auditor staff, and we recognize that some of the houses weren't done.
Were you able to come to that conclusion before going up with the staff of the audit office?
Sometimes persons will call, because normally when we do an assessment and approval, we send letters to the clients to let them know what we have approved. So over a period of time and nothing has happened, some of the clients will call to let us know, well, the persons have visited, they've taken pictures, but nobody has come back as yet. So we would get that information coming back, so we would know that they haven't started as yet.
Final question, do you think the follow-up is rigorous enough to facilitate people who are really in need of state assistance? Are you satisfied that the follow-up has been rigorous enough?
No, it's not, it hasn't been.
Minister Husbands is next. Mr. Can I ask you, Ms. Hanaway, who's the head of the Poverty Eradication Bureau at this time covered in the report?
2007 to 2016 was Miss Diana Haynes.
Ms. Diana
After-
Haynes?
Yeah, after 2016 to 19 was Miss Sonia Hamlin.
Just a second. Ms. Diana Haynes was there up to 2016?
Yes, up to 2016.
And after Ms. Haynes,
Miss Sonia Hamlin.
did you say Ms. Suzanne Hamlin?
Sonia Hamlin. Oh,
Sonia Hamlin. Post 260. Yes, Minister Husband. Suzanne Troy.
Thank you very much, Chair. Hi, good afternoon,
yeah.
ma'am. I just want to take you back a little bit. You said that your current position is that of Chief Investigator?
Field
Field
investigator.
How many field investigators are there in your department?
During the period 2007 to 9, there were 5 of us. From 2010 to present, 1.
One,
Yes, please.
and that's you.
That's me.
Wow. Okay. Could you just take us through when you're doing assessments of cases?
Mhm.
What is it you are trained to look for? What is it you're required to assess and report on?
Okay, if you will notice that the booklet would have an idea of what we look at. We look at the whole family situation, the family dynamics and whatnot, and the employment situation of the household and the income of the households.
Okay. And based on, did you have thresholds that determined whether or not this person was a good candidate for assistance or did not qualify for assistance? There were thresholds?
We used the IADB, at the time, we used the IADB report of the poverty line at $5,503 per annum per household.
Sorry, how much?
$5,503
Okay.
per household per annum.
And that's Barbados dollars?
Yes,
or-
please.
All right. So when you analyze the information, fill out your form and so on, you would then make a recommendation if something should be granted. And so you would do this assessment on a case-by-case basis?
Yes, please.
Okay. Did you all also carry out assessments of proposals submitted by NGOs or community-based organizations and so on for assistance?
Assessments are done on everybody who seeking assistance.
No, I was asking, like, if I had a community group that was seeking to do something for the residents in my area, would the field investigator be the person who would do an assessment and make a recommendation as to whether or not it should be?
No, as the field investigator there, I work only with the individuals. The coordinator at the time, she did groups.
Okay, so the coordinator was the person who would make assessments for other types of assistance.
Yes,
And that would include non-governmental organizations, community-based
Yes, please.
organizations, et cetera.
Mhm.
Okay. The report says at 443 that a sample comprising 316 cases, of those 316 cases, there were 122 cases for which no assessments were done. But obviously, a determination was made to issue assistance to these 122 cases. Are you aware of any conditions under which a field investigator would not have conducted an assessment and assistance was rendered?
all persons have an assessment done, all. We might have had one case where it was an ongoing case, which was a medical case, and we would just do an addendum to the assessment. But all assessments are done on everyone.
Is that to your certain knowledge, or were there situations where you may not have been aware that a request was made and it was dealt with separately outside of field investigators? Could that happen?
Yes, it could.
It could. In cases like that, to whom would those persons have gone to? Because if it is not the field investigator, they're not calling back to you when they don't hear from you.
Mhm.
There's somebody that they're communicating with. There's another structure in the office that engages them. Do you know what other structure they were engaging to get assistance?
Okay, there were only two persons in the poverty eradication and reduction program. That was myself and the coordinator. If I am not there to do an assessment, the coordinator, she would do it herself.
No, this is, you're speaking about now, that was
No.
only
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
and the coordinator.
Yes.
But when there were 5, could it be that they were seen by other field investigators, or if they were not seen by the field investigators, is it then the coordinator who would have had to say something that would result in a person getting assistance? I'm trying to find out what is this alternative pathway.
Well, they would be seen by the other field investigators, but if there's no one there, none of the investigators there, which would be out in the field, the coordinator would do the
And
assess the person.
okay, and who were the coordinators over the past 10 years? You've been there a good while.
The same Ms. Haynes and Ms. Hamlin, same coordinators.
Ms. Haynes and Ms. Hamlin? When, did you all do periodic reviews, you know? Like, when you have field investigators going out, you might on a monthly basis have a meeting, you share and discuss what you've seen in the field. If there was something you were uncertain about, you might raise it there. Did you all have those types of meetings?
Yes, we would have a monthly meeting, but if we have concerns while we are out in the field, we come back in and we have discussions with the coordinator to see how we could work through those
Address it?
issues.
And during the times when you had meetings
Mhm.
together,
Mhm.
did any of the coordinators or other personnel in the department ever raise cases that were not done by field investigators? Do you know?
Not to my knowledge. However, we would have had cases referred to us done by the welfare department, but they would send them already prepared.
Okay. So it's possible that some of these 122 cases might have been assessed by the welfare department. Would they not send
They would send the assessments,
form?
yes.
Okay, so those should be in the
Should be,
department?
yes, they should.
Okay, thank you. Were there times when you made assessments and in your judgment, or in the judgment of a field investigator, this case did not reach the threshold, but in some mysterious manner it gets approved?
Yes, there have been a few cases that I might not have recommended, but when, after it being reviewed, it was recommended. It was approved, sorry.
Okay. How frequently would something like that happen?
It was not often.
It wasn't
Might have
often.
been a couple of cases, but not on a regular basis.
Not on a regular basis,
No.
and not often. A couple of cases would be in relation to people you assessed, or all 5 of you? Each of you had maybe a couple that were reassessed differently.
Yeah, all 5.
All five?
Mhm.
When assessments were done and you had those long gaps between your saying this person should get assistance and the actual assistance being delivered, what were some of the issues that contributed to the length of time it took to respond?
Length of time. We really didn't have a wide gap between cases approved and the disbursements of, or the assistance given.
How long a gap would you say it would take
As soon
between
as,
requests?
as soon as approval is given, as long as funds are available, funds are then dispersed and the assistance is given.
But you would know of situations, it may not happen in every case, but you've known of situations where there was a gap, where people called and said, well, look, somebody came and measured, or they came and did X or Y, but I haven't heard anything since.
Yes, there will be situations, and that would mainly obtain in terms of housing, not in terms of the other assistance like payment of arrears or anything like that.
Okay. And would you be made aware of why that gap was existing? Would you get to know, or did you go and inquire? Explain, because the client has gotten back to me and said nothing has started. Would you be given an explanation as to why something was not done?
I might inquire and was told yes that funds were sent off, but in terms of further follow-up, I might not have actually followed up with the commission, or I might have followed up with the commission and told that they would get back to us to let us know, but further follow-up probably wasn't.
Okay, so generally you would not know what were the causes of the delay?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. I just have one question specifically as a follow-on to Minister Husband's very detailed questioning. Thank you for coming. At paragraph 4.43, it says here that specifically as it relates to the financial officer of the ministry, which is the permanent secretary, it was noted that the approval of assistance required under the financial rules by the minister or the permanent secretary was not seen for specifically 36 cases. Do you have any idea how that would have been? How would there have been activity undertaken for cases that had not been approved by the ministry's officials?
No, ma'am, I would have no idea of that, because normally when the cases are submitted, approval is granted, and then it goes to a account section. I would have no idea why 36 cases would not have approval and then already get assistance.
A director would, you think? Director should be, the person in charge at the time should be in a position to
I
speak
can't
with.
say that, sir.
Hmm?
I can't say that.
So the person in charge would not know about something like that?
I,
You would imagine? Person in charge would know about something like that?
I don't know. Can't say that.
All right.
No, she would not.
All right, I have just one, two very simple questions. Then we'll let you go unless somebody else wants to speak. You did investigations, assessments of people to more or less confirm the degree of need and the type of assistance that was needed.
Yes, please.
Now, this mentions monies used to fund mortgage payments and marriage seminars. I'm sure you didn't investigate the reference to, did you?
In terms of
It's
the,
on page, where is it? I lost my page for the moment. It's on page,
60.
it's gone from in front of me. You are aware that is contained in the report?
Sorry, Reverend Adley,
Page 60.
looking from a picture. Your page, I think you're looking for is page 60.
Page 60.
Doubtful disbursement, 4.38.
Thank
I
you.
apologize for the lack of saying. I can't move so fast for the background.
Thank you, it's 4.3.
Welcome.
Yes, you're right. And there we were thinking that you were asleep, Dr. Brown?
Not at all.
Not at all. Yes, ma'am?
I would have done some assessments for mortgage arrears. In terms of the seminar and the shows, I would not have done anything on those.
We all assisted with mortgage arrears.
Every person that comes in gets an assessment done. So assessment is done on whatever you are requesting. That is done and sent for a decision. A decision is made whether they will assist or not.
Well, it was part of the program of the fund to provide financial assistance towards mortgage arrears.
Not that I can speak of, sir.
Sorry?
You asked if it was part of the program. I
Was
said
it
not.
part of the program of the eradication fund to provide people with assistance financially towards mortgage arrears?
Not that I'm aware of.
You never therefore recommended,
Pardon?
you never therefore recommended that assistance, that type of assistance for anybody?
I might have, but I can't recommend, but the approval is what would obtain then.
Do you know of any cases where approval might have been given for assistance?
Pardon?
Do you know of any cases where financial assistance would have been given by the fund towards mortgage arrears?
Yes, I believe approval was granted for mortgage arrears.
I want to refer specifically to the paragraph 4.38 on page 60. Notwithstanding the limitation in determining the appropriateness for disbursements from the fund, there were disbursements which seemed not to readily fit the description of alleviation of poverty. These included disbursements for mortgage arrears, marriage seminar, sponsorship of shows. Criteria used to approve these disbursements was not provided. Previous coordinator of the fund was of the opinion that assistance to mortgages was not part of the mandate of the fund. So how do you respond to that?
Sir, I was only responsible for assessments, and assessments had to be done for every request that came in. So if assessment was submitted, the decision is left to persons making it, whether they approve or not.
You made recommendations for assistance.
But all recommendations are not always accepted.
You made recommendations for assistance with mortgage arrears?
I might have, yes.
And do you know if the assistance was provided?
Some.
All right. Are you in a position to speak to us specifically about the circumstances, clients involved? Not necessarily right now. If you check your notes, you'll be able to find the information as to persons for whom mortgage assistance would have been recommended by yourself, and those,
Yes, I
and
would.
those to whom the assistance would have been given.
Yes, I would. If I check my notes, yes, I would.
We can have access to that information. How soon?
When I go back to the office.
All right.
Next week.
We will follow up with a communication to you on that matter.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else? Any last questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
2 questions. A little juvenile, who made the final decision on the approvals?
Good question.
During which period of,
Any period. In
Okay,
other
during-
words, I guess the person had the same job. Who, as in terms of job description, who made the final decision? A board, the coordinator, the minister, the permanent secretary?
well, between 2007 to 8, we had a committee,
Mm-hmm.
and after that, the decisions are made by the permanent secretary, deputy permanent secretary, and the minister.
Okay, so I remember the discussion earlier said that there were cases that were approved that never came through the field officers. Is that correct?
There were decisions made that,
There were approvals made,
approvals,
cause, where was it? Go ahead.
I think I was asked if cases would have been done that, we didn't know, that I would not have known of that would have been approved.
Right.
Probably other officers would have done and not submitted assessments, something to that effect?
But
Okay.
the normal rule would be that officers will submit the assessments, then they'll go to the I call it board for approval, correct?
Yes.
All right, were there any cases that you were unaware of, or your officers, I'm not sure how many, at which period, would have seen approval for? Did you all ever follow up on that to see if the persons were deserving of the approvals, or it was just taken as is?
If they were deserving of the approvals, as
Yes,
long
in
as
other
they,
words, I see a 36, somebody, I think Minister Cummings mentioned it, that 36 people also noted that the approval of assistance by either the minister or permanent secretary was not seen for 36 cases. I'm trying to find out who would have sent in those 36 cases.
oh, that I cannot speak to.
Okay. All right, and with respect to the cases that were denied, I know everybody would not be approved. In other words, people that you would have seen that in your opinion needed approval, deserved approval, what were the circumstances that they would be denied?
The income in the household, because even though that there are some that would have come just over the poverty line. So those would, especially there's income in the household, and we recognize that whatever they're requesting can be done with somebody in community house, we would not assist them. We would just ask them to speak with the family members so that they would assist with the arrears that are outstanding.
Right, but I remember I heard you saying that not all of the cases that you felt needed assistance were approved? Or did I have it wrong?
No, not that. All of the cases that would have been submitted would not be approved. Not that I felt they should be approved, that they were not approved because they might not have been recommended, or they might have been recommended and it was noticed that, and it was then later denied.
Okay, I think that's it, Mr. Chair.
All right, I see nobody else asking for the floor. So, Ms. Hannaway, we're gonna thank you. And again, you, Mr. Pollard. Ms. Hannaway will communicate with you directly with respect to this last matter we've been talking about, where requests pursuant to your assessments would be made for financial assistance towards mortgages, marriage seminars, shows. We're gonna ask of you specific information which you can document and just have written back to us. Perhaps you may not have to come back here, but we need to have that document.
Okay,
So we'll communicate that to you directly, yeah?
very well.
So I thank you very much, Mr. Paul, for the refreshments downstairs. There are some refreshments downstairs, and you're invited to partake of those if you would, once you descend. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening.
And colleagues, it would seem to me that there are a number of things that we would want to be zero in on as we compile the report. A lot of it has to do with gaps and deficiencies, perhaps, in the systems, to tighten the system, particularly concerned from the time Minister Cummings first raised it last meeting, the long period of time between requests for help for poor people and the system not being able to deliver. Minister Jordan raised again today for decade, for almost a couple of decades in one instance. Certainly a long time. 15 years is a long time. And the extent to which the eradication fund is still an active fund and needs to be resourced, et cetera, et cetera. But we will come to those matters. I think, based on what we heard today, and this is my view, you can tell me what you think, we need to have the permanent secretary of the ministry to come, and perhaps those who were directors of the fund up to 2016 and beyond, the two names given to us, that would be my view. And we can quickly come to closure on this particular matter with respect to urban, rural, and the poverty alleviation fund. Minister Husbands, do you think we should have those two persons who served as heads of the agency,
Yes,
as well as PS?
and the coordinators,
Yeah, well,
because the coordinators are part of the chain.
yeah.
And
This particular coordinator distanced himself from the central issue. He seemed to limit his activity more or less to the IC bridge aspect of the program and not other wider aspects. Minister Jordan, what do you think? That's all right.
We're not hearing here.
His mic, your mic, Connie.
Yeah,
Oh,
they're not
sorry.
recording you because you're not being heard.
No, I was just saying that I think it would be good to get the information of to hear from the permanent secretary, because it seems to me that there was some discomfort upon the assuming of office by the permanent secretary, and the discomfort seemed to have had to do with how the funds were being disbursed and the work that was being done. So from that perspective, to hear from the permanent secretary, what was it that caused what to me is a pretty drastic step to say, look, let us stop this. It would be good to hear that, the thought process.
Minister Cummings, Minister Cattle, Dr. Brown, any view on this? We should have the two directors prior to this immediate period come and PS.
Agreed fully.
I agree.
All right. That'll bring us to the end of this sitting for today. We would hear a motion for adjournment until next Friday, God willing. So move second, moved and seconded, and all those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say nay. Ayes carried, motions carried. We stand adjourned till next Friday, God willing. Thank you.